Have you ever caught your adult child eyeing your jewelry just a little too long? Or maybe they've made a casual comment like, "One day, all this will be mine," followed by a little laugh that somehow didn't sit right with you. It might have felt like nothing, but deep down, you couldn't shake the feeling. Was it just a harmless comment, or something more? If you're over 60, like many of us are, you've probably reached a point where you value peace more than possessions. You want to enjoy the time you have, travel if you're able, buy that comfy recliner, maybe spoil the grandkids now and then. But what happens when the people you love most, your children, begin acting in ways that make you question whether they're really on your side or quietly keeping tabs on your money? You're not alone. Across the country, thousands of older adults are facing this uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, the people we raised with love and sacrifice aren't just concerned about our well-being, they're quietly planning for our wealth. And by the time most people realize it, they've already lost control of their finances, their freedom, and in many cases, their peace of mind. In today's conversation, I want to talk with you, not at you, about something that's hard to admit, but absolutely vital to recognize. The warning signs that your adult children may be more interested in your assets than your health. I know this can feel heartbreaking, maybe even shameful to think about. But I promise, this is not about blame, it's about protection. About helping you feel empowered, not paranoid. And I'll show you, through real stories and practical steps, how to take back your confidence and live on your terms. Let's begin with a woman named Margaret. She's 72, full of life, and lives in Portland. After losing her husband, Margaret noticed her 3 grown children suddenly becoming much more involved in her life. At first it felt comforting. Family dinners, more calls, frequent check-ins. But soon, the tone began to shift. Her son Michael started suggesting she sell her home. "It's just too much space for one person, Mom." Her daughter Emily asked if she'd reconsider taking that European cruise. "What if you need the money for medical care?" Then came the biggest red flag. Her oldest, Jason, asked to be added to her bank account. "Just in case something happens," he said. Margaret wasn't sure how to feel. Was she being cynical? Ungrateful? Or was her gut telling her the truth? She did the right thing. She confided in a longtime friend, someone who gently encouraged her to speak with a family counselor. And that counselor, who had seen this exact pattern dozens of times, opened Margaret's eyes. Her children weren't looking out for her. They were securing what they believed was their future inheritance. That brings us to the first major warning sign: when your children take an unusual interest in your will, your estate, or your valuables. Maybe you've noticed them making little comments about your antique table, your coin collection, or your home. They might say things like, "Have you updated your will lately?" Or, "Who's going to get Grandma's wedding ring?" On the surface it seems casual, even flattering. But over time, if these conversations keep coming up, it's a red flag. Thomas, a 68-year-old retired engineer from Seattle, started noticing this shift with his daughter Claire. Every time she visited, she'd walk straight to his display case of collectible coins. "Dad, you know I've always loved this one," she'd say. "Have you thought about who you want to leave it to?" At first he felt proud, maybe even touched by her interest. But then she offered to help him sort through the collection and write down what should go to whom. And that's when it clicked. Claire never cared much about the coins when Thomas was younger or healthier. So why now? If you're seeing this kind of behavior, I want to give you something simple you can do starting today. Start a small notebook, or just a few pages tucked in your drawer. Write down the date and what was said. Nothing fancy. But the moment you start documenting these conversations, something powerful happens. You create awareness. You tell yourself and your family that you're paying attention. And people who know you're aware are far less likely to keep testing the waters. The next time someone brings up your will or your belongings, you might calmly say something like, "I've noticed you've brought this up a few times recently. Just so you know, my estate is already handled through my attorney. Let's focus on enjoying our time together instead." That one sentence can shift the entire tone of the conversation and reveal a lot about the other person's intentions. Now let's talk about another common pattern, one that can sneak up on even the most confident among us. Have you ever been made to feel guilty for spending your own money? Maybe you bought yourself a new recliner or planned a dream trip, only to hear your son or daughter respond with concern disguised as caution. Are you sure that's wise, Mom? Or, you really should be saving that money for medical bills. Here's the truth. You've worked hard your entire life. You've earned the right to enjoy the fruits of that work. When someone makes you feel ashamed for treating yourself, especially when your spending is reasonable and thoughtful, they may not be worried about you. They may be worried about your money. Let me tell you about Linda, a 76-year-old widow from Chicago. After her husband passed, Linda finally decided to do something they had always dreamed about together, an Alaskan cruise. She was thrilled. But when she told her son, his reaction stopped her cold. "That's kind of wasteful, don't you think?" he said. "What if you get sick and need that money?" Linda, like many of us would, started to doubt herself. She canceled the trip. But a few months later, she overheard that same son telling another family member she was becoming irresponsible with her money and might need help managing it soon. The saddest part? She never rebooked the cruise. If you've had someone respond like that, I want you to remember something. It is not selfish to enjoy your life. In fact, it's necessary. You deserve joy, adventure, and comfort. So when the criticism comes, try this simple response. I've worked hard for this money, and I intend to enjoy my life. My financial decisions aren't up for discussion. Say it with calm confidence. And if they push back, you can add, "This conversation is over. I won't be discussing my spending again." Then stick to it. Consistency creates boundaries, and boundaries protect peace. You might also consider speaking with a financial advisor, someone who understands the unique needs of older adults and can help you set a plan that supports both freedom and security. It's amazing how empowering it feels to know your money is working for you, not for someone else's expectations. And I want you to keep something close to your heart. You do not need to apologize for living. Not to anyone. Especially not your grown children. Let's pause here. Take a breath with me. These moments can feel heavy, but knowledge brings clarity, and clarity brings strength. You're not alone. You're not imagining things. You're simply starting to see more clearly, and that's a beautiful thing. Now, let's keep going. Because there's more to watch for. And you're strong enough to face it. Have you ever noticed your child suddenly showing deep interest in your health? But only the clinical details, not the emotional part? Maybe they ask how your blood work came out or what the doctor said about your arthritis. But the moment you share how it makes you feel, how lonely, or frightened, or even just tired, you get silence or a quick change of subject. You're left thinking, that was odd. And you'd be right. This brings us to a particularly subtle but incredibly revealing pattern. When adult children become very attentive to your medical status, without showing genuine emotional support, it may not be concern. It may be calculation. Let me tell you about Gerald. He's 79, a retired high school teacher from Denver, recently diagnosed with Parkinson's. After the diagnosis, his daughter, Melissa, began calling him more often. At first, Gerald was touched. But soon he noticed something that gave him pause. Every call revolved around his condition, but not in a warm or caring way. She wanted numbers, timelines. What stage are you in now, Dad? Did the neurologist say how fast it'll progress? Can you still drive? But when Gerald tried to talk about how scared he was, how uncertain he felt about losing independence, Melissa would quickly say, "Well, you just have to stay positive," and move on. She never offered to come with him to appointments, never asked how he was coping, just the facts. No feeling. The real turning point came when Gerald asked her to come with him to a specialist appointment. Just once. Melissa had an excuse. "Too busy." "But let me know what the doctor says," she added. That said it all. If this sounds familiar, I encourage you to do something simple but powerful. Test their involvement. Be direct. Say, "I have a doctor's appointment Tuesday at 2. I'd like you to come with me." No hints. No roundabout requests. Just the ask. And then watch their response. If they're consistently too busy, but keep asking for health updates, that's not support. That's surveillance. The good news is, you have options. You don't have to rely on someone who wants your medical records more than your well-being. Most hospitals now offer patient advocates or social workers who can help seniors navigate appointments, understand treatment plans, and even just have someone by their side. Many of these services are free or low cost, especially through senior care programs. You can also reach out to local senior centers or community organizations. There are support groups both in person and online where people understand what you're going through, not just physically, but emotionally. You'll be amazed how much lighter life feels when you don't have to go through it alone, or when you surround yourself with people who see you, not just your condition. And if your child really wants to be involved, great. Let them show up in a way that goes beyond information. Ask them to sit with you at an appointment, help you with follow-up care, or simply be present when you need to talk. Their response will tell you everything you need to know. Now let's shift to something even more dangerous, something that doesn't just undermine your trust, but can actively erode your safety. I'm talking about isolation. Emotional isolation, social isolation, and even physical isolation from the people who care about you. You might think it sounds extreme, but it often starts small. A son tells you your sister is too stressful to talk to. A daughter insists your best friend gossips too much, and it's better if you don't confide in her. One day, you realize you haven't had your regular lunch with your neighbor in months. People stop calling, and it's not because they've forgotten. It's because someone has slowly, quietly made it harder for them to reach you. That's exactly what happened to Barbara, an 81-year-old grandmother in Phoenix. Her daughter Rachel moved in to help after a minor fall. At first, it was a blessing. But before long, Barbara noticed something strange. Her younger sister stopped visiting. When she asked why, Rachel would say, "She just upsets you, Mom. You're always exhausted after she comes." Barbara's phone would mysteriously go missing, calls would get forgotten, and messages were never passed on. The final straw? Rachel had quietly added herself to Barbara's checking account, claiming it was to make bill paying easier. But her sister had started asking questions. And when Barbara was cut off from that sister, there was no one left to sound the alarm. If you've seen even a hint of this happening, take it seriously. Isolation isn't protection. It's control. It's one of the biggest risk factors for financial and emotional abuse in older adults. People who are cut off from their support systems are far more vulnerable to manipulation. So here's what you can do. Start reconnecting, intentionally. Call someone you trust. Invite a neighbor over for tea. Join a weekly group activity, even if it's just bingo at the senior center. Create a few regular points of connection in your week that don't depend on your children. A standing phone call every Sunday with a friend. Coffee with your cousin every other Thursday. Tell people you trust about these routines, so they notice if something changes. You deserve a full, rich life, with voices in it that aren't trying to control you. A support network isn't just about company. It's your safety net. And the stronger that net is, the harder it is for anyone to isolate you. And let me just say this clearly. If someone in your life discourages you from having relationships outside of them, that's not love. That's ownership. You are not anyone's property. You are not an asset to be monitored. You are a whole human being who deserves love, autonomy, and dignity. Take that to heart. Let's take another breath here. I know this may stir up a lot. But remember, awareness is your greatest defense. Every step you take to stay connected, to assert your voice, to pay attention to the details, that's a step toward protecting your independence and your peace. Now let's keep going. You're doing the hard work, and it matters. Let's talk about something that often starts with a smile and ends with your signature on a piece of paper. It might sound like this. Dad, let me be added to your bank account, just in case something happens. Or, wouldn't it be easier if my name were on the house too, so I can help you manage it? At first glance, these offers seem thoughtful, maybe even helpful. After all, managing bills can be a hassle, especially if you're recovering from a surgery or dealing with confusing paperwork. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Once someone's name is added to your financial accounts or your property deeds, that person often gains legal control, and in many cases, access to your money. This is exactly what happened to Edward, a 74-year-old widower from Minneapolis. He'd always been close with his son Brian, and after a mild stroke, Brian offered to help with the bills. "Let's just add me to your checking account, Dad. That way I can pay them if you're not feeling well." Edward agreed. It sounded practical. But 6 months later, when he reviewed his bank statements, something he hadn't done in a while, he noticed something strange. Every week, like clockwork, $500 had been withdrawn and sent to Brian's account. When Edward asked about it, his son didn't deny it. "That was for errands," Brian said. "Gas money, grocery trips, all the time I spend helping you. $12,000, gone. No agreement, no conversation, just taken." Edward's story isn't rare. Financial elder abuse investigators report that joint accounts are one of the most common ways adult children drain their parents' savings without consequences. It starts with a signature and ends with regret. And the worst part? Many older adults feel too ashamed to speak up or afraid to confront their children for fear of damaging the relationship. But you are not helpless, and you do not owe anyone unlimited access to your life savings. So what can you do? Start with this simple principle. Never add anyone to your accounts or property without first speaking with an independent professional, a financial advisor, or an elder law attorney. It might cost a small consultation fee, but it could save you tens of thousands of dollars and protect your control over your future. If you've already added someone, don't panic. It's not too late. Call your bank today. Ask how to remove someone from the account or how to open a new account in your name only and transfer your funds. Banks do this all the time. You're not making a scene. You're protecting your independence. And if you're feeling pressured, try this calm, firm response. "I appreciate your concern, but I've spoken with my bank and my attorney, and I'm handling things with their support." That one sentence can set a clear, respectful boundary, and if they push back, it reveals even more about their true intentions. You may also consider alternatives, like a limited power of attorney, which allows someone to help you with certain tasks without giving them full control of your money. A good elder law attorney can help you set up safeguards so your finances stay in your hands. This is about more than dollars and cents. It's about dignity. Your money is not just money, it's decades of hard work, sacrifice, and planning. You have every right to decide how it's used and who, if anyone, gets to help you manage it. Now let's talk about the final and perhaps most painful warning sign. This one shows up in the reactions, not the requests. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. It happens when you say no, when you set a boundary, when you make a decision about your money, and your child responds not with respect, but with anger. Maybe they lash out. Maybe they guilt trip you. Maybe they grow cold, distant, even cruel. Suddenly, you're not the parent anymore. You're the obstacle. This happened to Richard, a 77-year-old retired business owner in Tampa. For years, he'd planned to leave something to his church, a building fund that meant a lot to him and his late wife. When he shared his decision with his son, hoping it would be received with understanding, he was blindsided. "You're giving our inheritance to strangers?" his son snapped. "After everything I've done for you?" That single conversation escalated into a full-blown argument. His son accused him of selfishness, said he might stop visiting, all because Richard chose to donate his own money. And that, right there, is the most telling sign of all. When love comes with strings. When kindness depends on control. When your financial decisions determine whether your children treat you with respect. It's heartbreaking, but it's also clarifying. If this has happened to you, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not selfish. You are not ungrateful. You are not wrong. You are a whole human being with the right to make choices about your money, your property, and your future, even if those choices don't benefit your children. Love that is conditional on inheritance is not love. It's manipulation. And it's time to protect yourself. One of the most effective things you can do is prepare a simple script for moments like this, something you can say when conversations turn ugly. It can be as simple as, "I understand you're upset, but my financial decisions are final. If we can't talk about anything else, I'll need to end this conversation." Then follow through. Hang up the phone. Leave the room. Document the date, the conversation, and their response. Patterns matter. And if a time ever comes when you need to prove emotional manipulation or financial abuse, those notes can be a powerful form of evidence. More importantly, they're a reminder to you, a reminder that you are standing tall, holding firm, and refusing to let guilt dictate your golden years. Let's take a moment here. Breathe with me. That was a lot. But you made it through. And you're stronger for it. You've now seen the 5 signs, the comments about your will and valuables, the guilt around spending, the surface-level concern about your health, the quiet isolation, and the pressure for financial control. When one shows up, it might be nothing. But when 2 or 3 come together, it's time to pay attention. You're not being paranoid. You're being proactive. And you're doing exactly what wise, loving, self-respecting people do. You're choosing to protect your life, your legacy, and your peace. If any part of this touched you or reminded you of something you've seen, don't keep it to yourself. Share it in the comments. Your story might be the very thing that helps another person recognize what's happening in their own life. And if you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We create content for strong, independent seniors who want to live fully, love freely, and protect what they've built. You deserve relationships that are rooted in love, not expectation. You deserve a future that reflects your values, not someone else's assumptions. And you deserve peace, true, unshakable peace, in every decision you make. Here's to you, to strength, to clarity, to living your best life at any age.